This is part 2 of how to restore your headlights. You can check part 1 in the top right corner for the tools and products that I use. This video specifically is just to teach you the actual steps on how to restore your foggy and hazy headlights. Initially, I wasn't going to do this, but after I finished editing the video, I realized there was a lot of information in that video. So I went ahead and gave you an 8-step guide on how to actually restore the headlights. So everything I say in this video, except distilled into this guide. Also, I give you the 14-point checklist on what you need to do if you're like, let's say you go to a job site or you're doing this as a personal car. There's just 14 points to check through as you're going through the process to make sure you're not missing anything. I also just included all the tools and products that you need. So all the tools that, all the links are included in here. And on top of that, I also included, if you do want to do this as a business, if you want to start your own business, I also have this little section here on how to offer this as a service, how much to charge, how long it's going to take you. All of that's in the guide below. Just click down in the description box. So for starters, I'm just going to wipe it down with water. You can use a waterless wash, resistant wash. This is just to get any loose dirt or contaminants off the headlight. Next, I'm going to use O&R and a clay pad to just clay it down. You could probably skip this step because we're going to go into sanding, but it only takes 2 seconds, so might as well do it just to make sure we're working a clean surface. Now, I'm actually not going to do this part. I'm just going to be focusing on this headlight right here. So just a few seconds of claying to make sure it's nice and clean. Alright, now it's a smooth headlight. Now it's time to tape up the headlight. We want to protect the edges of the paint to make sure while we're sanding, the sanding disc doesn't go over this edge and actually sand the paint, as that would be pretty bad. So we're going to tape up, again, I'm only doing this headlamp right here. So if you were to do the whole thing, you would tape up everything, all the edges. But since we're just doing this, I'm just going to tape down this bottom part and I'll edge off this other headlamp. And one thing you'll notice is that I double up on the tape, and you want to do this so the sanding doesn't pass the single line of tape. So if you put 2, it's much safer and much more secure that you won't pass for the paint with the sanding. Okay, and we have the tape all set up. Now I'm going to start off with 800 grit. This headlight isn't actually that bad, so I could possibly try with 1000, but if it doesn't do a good enough job, then I have to rework myself. So I'm better off just to make sure I'm going to start off with 800. Remove all the factory clear coat and then go to 1000, 2000, and 3000. The reason I'm going all the way up to 3000 is because this machine isn't strong enough to take out 2000 grit sanding marks. If you have a rotary machine, you can definitely stop at 2000 and you'll take out the sanding marks with the rotary because that one has the power. This one doesn't, so I have to move up all the way to 3000. Now, starting with 800, there's like 2 types of thoughts, whether you should start dry or use water to keep it lubricated. I myself just give it a light mist to start off, but others do always talk about just going dry to get the most, basically scratch at it the most when it's dry, because if you use water, you technically are diluting it. So I just give it a quick mist and then I get started. If you want to play around with it, you want to do one headlight completely dry on the first run, and on the next headlight you want to give it you want to try off with misting water. Try it out, see which one works better for you. So again, you don't need much. That's enough for the initial pass. I'm gonna set it to around 3000 and then I'm gonna bump it up 1. Okay, so you want to keep a consistent pressure throughout the headlight. You don't want to put too much down pressure because you may have uneven spots where you're sanding a little bit too much because you're putting too much down pressure. So you want to have a consistent down pressure throughout the entire headlight. You want to have the sanding disc completely flat on the surface, and you want to have slow hand movements. You don't want to rush this and blaze through it. You want to give it enough time to work on it, to eat through that deteriorated clear coat, and to make sure you have everything nice and even. This is the most important step that's going to set how the rest of the headlight restoration is going to go. So don't rush it, even pressure, and give it the working time to really eat through that clear coat. Even though I'm going to use the 500 sanding disc again, I want to make sure I'm working with a clean disc and a clean headlight. That's very critical. You always want to be working on a clean surface. Okay, and that was the first pass. I'm going to go for a second application, a second pass, so to speak. Okay, now this is the second application with 500 grit. Again, it's the same thing, consistent pressure, even pressure, let it work
and you want to consistently spread the water to let any of that residue run down, so you can always be working on a clean surface. You don't want to put too much pressure because it might get some uneven area. So consistent, firm pressure throughout the headlight.
Okay, then I'll come back. Now the headlight is pretty even with the 800 grit sanding. Now if there was some lighter areas that clearly didn't get sanded as well, we'd want to even that out so it's a consistent phase throughout the headlight. Now one thing to note is if you're sanding headlights and there's like a cloudy area that doesn't want to get sanded, or like you pass over it but it still doesn't completely sand like other parts, that's the clear coat still on the headlamp. So and I don't see it here, so which is why I can't show you, but if there is still some spots that just aren't showing this, aren't reacting the same way as other areas, you have to sand that part a little bit more to get rid of the clear coat. Now that the first phase of 800 is complete, we're gonna go over to 1000 grit sanding. Now you want to make sure that the headlight is completely clean before you get started. You don't want to have any 800 grit left in here, because if you start sanding with 1000 and you catch an 800 grit, then obviously you're gonna leave deeper scratches and you're gonna clearly tell that they're still there once you completed the headlight. So you always want to make sure the surface is completely clean, and all that means is give it a few mists of water and wipe it down, and you should be good to go. So again, now going forward, I will keep it lubricated much more than the first pass. So I will start off with a few mists and then keep on misting it to make sure it stays nice and lubricated.
So now I'm speeding up the video because it's kind of all the same, but every time you move up to a new grit level, you want to make sure you're giving yourself ample enough time to sand out the previous sanding marks, because if you don't, once you're all done, you're going to see small traces of previous sanding marks, which is obviously not what you want. So give yourself enough time to work that sanding disc on the headlight.
Okay, so 1000 grit is complete. We're gonna rinse this off, wipe it down, and move on to 2000 grit. And so the purpose of it is every time we go up a grit level, it's gonna get clearer and clearer. So it looks a bit better than the 800. When we go to 2000, it'll look better than now, and when we get to 3000, it'll look much better, and so on and so forth.
So we're almost wrapping it up with the sanding. We're on 2000, about to go to 3000, and then we can move on to compounding and polishing. Your headlights at this point should be much more clear, have much more clarity, and just look overall way better than what we started for a few moments ago.
And that wraps up 2000. Again, we're gonna wipe it down to get a clean surface. Now it's 3000 grit.
Alright, so the headlight's looking much better with a lot more clarity. We're wrapping up the last sanding phase of 3000, consistent pressure, giving it enough time to work it in, and applying even pressure throughout the headlight.
And that is 3000. We'll wipe it off, and then we'll move towards the compounding and polishing. So I think the camera was off, so I put some M105 on the pad. I rubbed it in to make sure there's compound across the entire pad, and then I went straight to work.
Okay, so because I have not the most powerful polisher out there, I'm going very slow and not applying much pressure because it's gonna bog down. Now if you have a stronger dual action or something like a rotary, you can put much more down pressure on, that's gonna cut more through those scratches. But again, because I don't have a very strong polisher, I'm gonna have to take my time, slow movements, left to right, up and down, making sure I'm just giving it time to work. But if you have a strong machine, you can go a lot faster. So now let me just fast forward it so you can just see the entire process. But it just depends on what type of machine you have as a polisher.
So it looks pretty good. We're gonna take it one more step and we're gonna polish the headlights. Because remember, this entire process is about removing the scratches that we put the step prior. So 800, we put the initial scratch to remove the coating. 1000 was to refine the 800. 2000 was to refine the 1000. 3000 was to refine the 2000. The compound was to refine 3000, and the polish is to refine the compound. So we're working our way up back to clarity.
Okay, so since this is a polishing phase, I'm not putting as much down pressure, and I'm not going as slow, because this is to refine. This is the last step. It's to refine the lightest scratches. So this is really just to make sure it's giving that last phase of clarity that you can get it. So slow motion, but not as slow and nowhere near as much pressure because it's the polishing phase. Now let me just forward you so you can see how how many passes I took. But again, you're gonna base the time on the product and just the headlight itself. So it's gonna be a case by case. I'm not gonna say you have to spend exactly 1 minute and then you're good. Just go by the headlight.
Okay, so that wraps up the polishing. Now we're gonna wipe it down. And there you have it. Those are restored headlamps. Now on these headlamps, there are still some rather deep scratches in there. If you want to go after all of them, you could potentially drop all the way down to 500 or like 300 and go very, very aggressive. You just got to make sure that you got to know it's going to take a lot longer, and you got to really work each step longer to make sure you're refining those sanding marks that you're putting in place. Next would be to use an IPA wipe down. So I'm using Car Pro Eraser here. This is to remove any oils that may be left over by the polish. And then next is you want to apply a protection, whether it be a wax, a sealant, or a coating. Plenty of options out there. If you're on a budget, if you're just doing it yourself, a sealant is fine if you're doing it as a business, or if you just want to really have prolonged protection on your headlights, I definitely go with a coating. Keep in mind how you're going to store your car. If you garage it 90% of the time throughout the day, then you can get away with a sealant because it's not going to be getting beat down by the sun every single day. Whereas if your car is outside 90% of the time in the direct sunlight, you may want to go with a coating because it's a lot stronger and more durable. Now, as you can tell, all over the truck and the engine bay, there's sling everywhere. Now, realistically, if this was not a video and I had full mobility around the truck, then I would close the hood until it almost closed all the way, so there's not that big old gap, so it doesn't sling everywhere. And other than that, you just gotta clean everything up once you're done. So you're gonna remove the tape, you're gonna use some some clay lube, some waterless wash, and just give the front end a quick wash depending on how dirty it is. Obviously, you don't want to leave any mess behind, so if you need to wash the entire front end, by all means do so. Because that's just the nature of headlights. If I was just doing it by hand, it wouldn't be as messy, as it wouldn't sling so much since I'm using a dual action. It's really gonna pick up that water and just throw it everywhere. So if you were doing it by hand, then it would definitely not be as bad. Also, let's say you don't want to get the 3-inch polisher, then if you want, you could even get away with buying this little foam pad, the 3-inch sanding disc, and just using it by hand. Or you can just get the sanding blocks themselves, but you can also get away with this and just sand it by hand. And if you have another dual action polisher or rotary, you can use that to get the scratches out. But if you don't want to actually buy that 3-inch polisher, just do this by hand, or there's various other methods you can do by sanding. So alright, so hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Again, I know this video was a lot of information. I have everything you need here, the 8 steps, the 14-point checklist, the tools and products, all the links to it. And then if you want to start this as a business, that's all in there too. Download that guide, because this video was a lot of information being thrown everywhere. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this video. Give your input on how you do headlight restoration. But other than that, as usual, like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.